Alrighty.
Okay.
Okay, we are live
There
now.
I am.
Awesome. All right. How are you then?
We are doing okay. Today is going to be a fun day, I think. I think it's going to be a fun day. It's either that or it's going to be a terrible day, and it's going to go down in infamy as possibly your worst Twitch stream ever.
I don't think we can have a worse. Maybe.
Oh, there is a worse Twitch stream.
No, I don't think so. I'm not sure. I'm trying to remember.
Oh, that's awesome. So today we are going to talk about just like last time when we talked, right? So we talked about disaster recovery last time I was on, and what it really was it was secretly a conversation about DNS and routing, realistically, right? Like, we just called it disaster recovery because that sounds cool. Well, today is also a talk about using Private Connect to connect to Salesforce, and it is also secretly about DNS and routing. And hey, we're going to throw in some plumbing there for good measure too. And actually, so along those lines, when it comes to plumbing, so last Monday for America, right? 4th of July is on Tuesday, so Monday might be a day where we don't actually do anything. Just saying. Hopefully my boss isn't on the stream right now. But, so I found out that I had a plumbing issue in my house, actually. And I had water leaking down my walls and into my basement and all over my first floor. And found out, right, that 30 years ago, somebody cut a hole in a pipe and tried to stuff it with glue and solve the problem. Literally 30 years ago. So that's kind of crazy. But, in analog to today's conversation, what it taught me was you need to know the plumbing in your four walls, right? And this is true, especially in application development. And what I want to call out to anyone on the stream right now, anyone who's paying attention, is networking might be for the networking team, but it affects you more than anybody as a developer, right? If you don't know how your code goes from point A to point B through your own environment, then you're always going to be troubleshooting in the dark, and you're never really going to have a good understanding of how to find that out. So we are going to kind of discover a little bit of that today as we kind of work our way through how to set up Private Connect. And, that means that it always starts with DNS. And for those of us who aren't familiar with DNS, I need to tell you that DNS is hands down the most important thing on the planet for you to know. And let me go ahead and click present here, because we're going to pull up my my screen up here.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm going to tell you, it's always DNS. It is always, always, always DNS. In fact, it's so always DNS that when I searched "it's always DNS" on Google, I got tons of separate articles that talked about how it's always DNS on Google. It is always, always a situation with DNS, and you're never ever going to get away with from it because, again, it's always DNS. So, this is kind of a cry out to literally everybody we're going to talk to today. Know your DNS and know your network, right? You don't have to know all the intricacies. You don't need to know that's a Cisco Catalyst 6500 connected to a 5432 blah, 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 something switch. What you do need to know, though, is that you're on this network, this is its net mask, this is its CIDR, this is how it works, and this is what it connects to over here, and that there's at least one or two firewalls in the way, right? And so today's architecture, we're going to start off like this. This is what I'm going to call a pseudo-traditional architecture for Salesforce looks like in a lot of instances. You might have a transit gateway attachment that goes to your data center. I'm using a VPC, and you'll understand why as we kind of get into it. I'm going to mute myself for just a second because sorry about that. So, so let's talk through what we're seeing here, right? We have our Cloud Hub 2.0 private space, 172.16.0.0.24. That means I have 255-ish addresses available to me that are going to either route via the internet for anything that doesn't start with this 172.16, anything through 172.16 through 172.31, right? This is where we're talking about why CIDRs and why networking is so important to understand, because this route table is going to tell me where does my traffic flow. This is going to show up to be really important later. We also see that my local CIDR, right, says, hey, don't ever leave the local stuff. And you're like, but Mike, those two both look almost the same except for that last number, right? So how CIDRs work is basically it always does the biggest number, this biggest slash number first, and then works its way backwards to figure out where it needs to go on the route table. So you'll see the very last one is this /0, meaning it's the last rule to ever be applied to the route table. And this is what we call a default route. When you set up your own private space, everything's going to go out the internet gateway by default, right? You have the ability to change that, by the way. If you did not know that, you can actually route all your traffic through your transit gateway or all your traffic through what they call a VGW. I'm going to call a VPN gateway. Keeps it simple. And the reason you want to know this is because you need to know where does your traffic flow to make sure it's either secure or it's going to the place where you think it's supposed to go when you're trying to troubleshoot your way through things. So when I have my Salesforce API right here hidden in my Cloud Hub private space, because when I look up my Salesforce address, and just so you know, I've created my own Salesforce org. Oop, that's the wrong one. Look at that. Alt-Tab is killing me today. And I just type in NSLOOKUP. You're going to see this 136, 146, blah, blah, blah numbers. That is just that is an IP space. That is, if we go back to our route table, doesn't actually match any of my 172 stuff. So that means by default, it's going to go out through this internet gateway, right? For some customers, we don't like that. We don't want that to happen. That seems like a bad idea because we want to protect all of the data that's in our network under our control. We want to keep it within our perceived control, right? Our four walls. So what do we want to do? Well, we can route every single thing out through this transit gateway attachment and into this VPC, but even then it still has to make its way to Salesforce at some point. So what do we do, right? And that's kind of where our little adventure starts here, is how do we set up Private Connect? How do we do these kinds of things? And how do we learn as we go along, okay? So to start, I'm going to assume you have a transit gateway set up. I assume you're going to have a VPC just to make things easier for us all. And we're going to start talking through what it takes to go to Private Connect. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a new tab, and I'm going to just realize I forgot to log into LastPass and probably type that password in wrong 6 times. Let's make sure the 2-factor dance. Come on, buddy. You can do it. There we go. All right. Awesome. So now I'm going to go to my, I'm going to go straight into my own personal Salesforce org, the Mike McDonald org, if you will. I'm really enjoying the music. Sorry. And we're gonna go ahead and shoot into setup once this finally loads up. Now if you're not familiar with Salesforce's setup, right, you could do kind of anything under the covers in here. And so, you can see all of these different features, all of these different ways to set up all sorts of different things. We're gonna actually just go ahead and go into the Private Connect section here. And so just using Quick Find makes it a lot easier once you're in setup to find everything you need to do in here. So clicking on Private Connect, I have this ability to come in here at some point, internet's quick as a bunny today, as we can see, right? It's working out really well. So one thing we have to do first is we have to find out what is our service name for our AWS region. And we kind of keep them obfuscated, we keep them hidden. The fact that I'm publishing this on a Twitch stream, I mean, if I get, sued, fired, etc., I'm sorry ahead of time. But, we're going to grab all of this information on this page once it finally loads. And this is probably my fault. I probably should have disconnected from our VPN. Again, know how your network flows, to help pull this up. And since this has just taken way too long for my attention span, we're going to go ahead and, there we are. So see how I have these service names based on which regions I'm jumping into? Those are important because that's how I'm going to basically be able to figure out which service am I calling in which specific region, because that's how a VPC endpoint works. So we're going to go ahead and jump over into AWS. And we have to set up what's called an endpoint in our VPC region. So I'm just going to come down here. And oh, by the way, just as a fun little fact, this is a hot flash. We are going to be publishing a blog that goes through every single one of these steps. Hopefully by the end of this Twitch stream. It kind of depends. The person who's supposed to publish it was on vacation until about 40 minutes ago. So as soon as they log on and get things done, we might actually you'll get to see everything that I did to make this happen, right? And so when we go and click create endpoint, we're going to use a private link ready partner service. And what we end up doing is we end up just spitting in that service name that we took from before and putting it into our VPC. And so without actually doing this, because this takes like 15 minutes to get all set up and everything, we're going to do the whole easy bake oven thing and say, oh, look, it's already done. Look at our VPC endpoint that's been created today. And so we have this VPC endpoint. We see its service name. We see all of these. We see 4 DNS names. Now, we have 4 DNS names. Again, it's always DNS because my VPC has 3 availability zones. Now, just in case we don't know what it is, an availability zone is basically an option for failover. In AWS's data centers, they create what are called availability zones, which are network, power, and physical server isolation. This means that if there's a power company that loses its power, let's say ComEd out in US East 1 is North Virginia, so ComEd in North Virginia dies. Well, that's okay because whoever isn't ComEd, because that's the only power provider I know in the world, the We Energy or something like that, for those of you in Wisconsin, their power will stay active, right? Maybe a little extra work because the grid is tight, but it'll keep that AZ active. And that way, I never actually have a point where I can't communicate with my endpoint. Now, just to take a look at what we get out of all of this, we're going to go ahead and jump into our terminal and just pop it out. And you're going to see, oh, look, here's each IP from each AZ. Now, if we were to go dig into our subnets and we'd say, oh, cool, so this endpoint fits in this CIDR, this endpoint fits in this subnet CIDR, this endpoint fits in this subnet CIDR, because when you generate that bigger subnet, like a /24, /25, down, you're basically actually going to then subnet it, if that makes any sense. You're going to subnet it, so that way then you split across those availability zones. It saves a ton of time, energy, frustration, etc. So we now have this endpoint. So let's actually go back to our diagram, and we're going to just do a quick search on, VPC endpoint. And we're going to actually take that little diagram and we're going to shove it in here. All right. Now, this VPC endpoint is not yet connected to anything. We just know that it's eventually going to be connected to Salesforce. Okay. So we now have to go back into Salesforce and we're going to click into my private connect setup, where we are going to then eventually take that VPC endpoint that we did get, which was this endpoint ID right here, which matches the endpoint ID that we're going to see right here. And it's going to go, okay, cool, right? We're all ready to connect, and it's going to hook and wire every single thing up as soon as I click sync. We're already sunk, we're already working. I don't want to click anything and break things in the middle of a demo. That seems like a silly idea. So what does that mean we've actually done? Well, we've taken our little endpoint here. As soon as I can get my red dot of happiness, and we are gonna just, boom, connect it straight into Salesforce. And so we'll call this, private connect link, okay? So what this actually is just simply a VPC endpoint that is got a private tunnel straight into Salesforce. It's effectively a super secret VPN tunnel. Like, I mean, if we want to break it down to what it really is, that's going to require people way smarter than me. And I think for the sake of all of us here, all of us normal people, at least on the stream, there's probably smarter people than me on the stream, so I should be careful with what I say. But at least from that standpoint, we now have this private link set up. So honestly, if we want, let's just point everything at the VPC endpoint and call it a day, right? So I'm actually going to take that URL and I'm going to use NetTools. And if you've never used NetTools in MuleSoft, which, Alex, please tell me you've used NetTools.
Nope.
What? What? Okay. All right. So if I take that VPC endpoint in NetTools and I just cram it in, so I'm actually going to have to go copy paste it again. Copy. I'm going to use, so NetTools is this great tool that allows you to use all of these cool features that are at the network stack. It's great for troubleshooting. In fact, because I do a lot of networking and security conversations for MuleSoft, I recommend every single customer have this deployed in every VPC, one per VPC, no matter, or per private space, whatever it is, Cloud Hub 1, Cloud Hub 2, please use this all the time. Never not use it. Whatever. So, in here, I can do things like, hey, let's just make sure that DNS works correctly. So I click run. Awesome. I'm getting my private internal IPs. That's exactly what I wanted to do. Now, because I have a lot of things pre-wired and I don't want to un-pre-wire them, what we're going to do is we're actually going to log into Anypoint, and I'm going to deploy NetTools to my disaster recovery VPC from last time that is not wired up to Private Connect. And that way we can kind of see the difference of what we're going to see on both sides here over time. And for those of you who've never looked at it, if you just type in NetTools MuleSoft in Google, the very first thing is the How to Use Network Tools application. I am totally going to just throw this into the comments, so I can't throw this in the comments. So I'm going to throw this to Alex, who's going to throw it into the comments because she is obviously far more advanced at this stuff than I am. In the meantime, I'm going to come down here. I'm going to pull down our NetTools jar, right? We'll continue. We'll sign in. We'll pull it down. And just because I have GitHub, GitLab, etc., like they need me to do this, you could pull this down without any authorization into GitHub. Don't worry too much about that. So while we're waiting for that to pull down, let's continue to talk about some of the things that we're going to see here, right? So we're going to go back to our original NetTools, and I'm going to say, okay, well, so this new VPC endpoint is basically the new ingress point for Salesforce now, okay? Which means that we should technically be able to just hit that endpoint, and we're going to use the socket section here, and we're just going to say, okay, well, we know we have to communicate over SSL HTTPS, so I'm just going to say, hey, VPC, blah, 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 on port 443. Yep, I can connect to it, which means to me that if we come back into our little diagram here, I have the ability, just the ability, we haven't done it yet, I have the ability to basically follow this route through my space, through the transit gateway attachment, through the transit gateway, into the next attachment, into my VPC, through the endpoint, back out through the private connect link, and straight into Salesforce. Now, I haven't edited my application to actually work appropriately yet, so we're going to get there, okay? So first thing we're going to do is, now that we've done that, well, let's just do a curl. Let's just see what happens. So it's going to be HTTPS, blah, 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 and I'm going to not paste in Network Tools application. I'm going to copy this guy again, and we're going to paste that in and click run. And it says it's found, but it's really not super happy. And the reason it's not happy is because we don't actually have our certs correct here. And the reason is, and this is something that we can go into maybe at a later session because TLS is its own giant monster, but I need, when I call a URL, the text in that URL has to match what the certificate that I'm calling says, right? So if I just call VPC blah, 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 it's going to say, yeah, you can connect, but that's not right, right? We don't match, right? There's no string match there. So that's going to be super problematic. So I'm just going to clear out my console here, and we have yet to download anything. This is amazing. I really should have left. Oh, No, it just works. Isn't that magic? Um, so, you know, uh, so what we have to do is instead we have to figure out a way to point my my MuleSoft domain name to that VPCE endpoint. Okay. So if we remember how we kind of did it last time on the DR conversation was we used Route 53, and I do this with all AWS natives because they're super easy, they're out of the box, and I'm lazy. And we're going to use Route 53, and we're going to overwrite that M McDonald blah 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 M McDonald mysalesforce.com thing. So what do we have to do? And by the way, again, easy bake oven already done. So we're just going to kind of talk through what we're doing here. So we'll shoot into Route 53. And by the way, this could be info blocks, this could be bind, this could be any DNS thing you want in the world. Absolutely does not matter. You could use anything. And what I did here was I created a private hosted zone. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with AWS Route 53, private hosted zones, these are zones that are only accessible by the VPCs you explicitly give permission to be accessible via. Okay? That means that no one else in the world will ever be able to see this subdomain of my.salesforce.com that I've created for my stuff. No one else will ever be able to get into this stuff. So what I've done here is I've created what's known as a CNAME. Again, rolling back to what I said before, CNAME, or back at the DR conversation, a CNAME is basically just, it's a canonical name. It's saying, hey, listen, this name, global.mulesoftplatform.com, actually points to primary.mulesoftplatform.com, which actually points to my ingress load balancer. Well, in this case, I'm going to say, hey, Michael McD 2306128887 blah 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 demo.my.salesforce.com actually points to that super secret VPCE endpoint, right? So what we've done is we've built out this DNS zone that I can now redirect everything. But we have a challenge, okay? So due to the way we do Cloud Hub, I can't just give this zone to my Cloud Hub VPC. It doesn't work. So because if any one of you has ever done any configuration of your private spaces or even your VPCs in Cloud Hub 1, because this will work in Cloud Hub 1, let's make that clear. We just like to talk about Cloud Hub 2 because it's way cooler. Infrastructure is cool, I guess. I don't know. You come in here, you click configure, and you got to put some IP addresses in here, right? You can't just say, hey, go connect to that private hosted zone over there. Nobody cares. Nobody wants to see anything like that. So what do we have to do? We have to set up what's called a resolver. This is going to give us an actual IP address endpoint to actually point to from Cloud Hub. So I come in here into resolver section on the left and create an inbound endpoint. Now, if you were using info blocks or bind or DNS mask, if you're a really small business or something like that, you wouldn't need a resolver. Your server that's hosting bind, info blocks, DNS mask, that is your resolver. You don't need to have anything special done here. AWS does a lot of stuff because they're trying to basically make it as easy as possible to kind of share things across multiple accounts and multiple stuff in a way that is, I'm going to say this very carefully, it is ultra secure explicitly within the AWS environment. That's neither bad nor good. That's just what it is, right? Like it's just meant to be within the AWS environment. So what did I do is I created a resolver that existed in each and every single one of my availability zones. So that means, again, small AZ outage, I lose part of US East 1, I'm still good. I've got 2 out of my 3 availability zones up and running and just doing their thing, just the way they're supposed to do. And you'll notice these are these are IP addresses that I can just copy pasta and throw right into here to make sure that in my internal DNS servers, which is exactly what I did. And so now my Cloud Hub can actually go, through here. Let's see here. I'm going to see if I can actually find, is there a Route 53 endpoint? I'm going to come up here. I'm just going to say, hey, cool, look. Now I've thrown Route 53 in here, and I've created this little resolver. We can do this. my mouse just kind of slows down as I'm trying to use Lucid. So now I can go through here, go through my gateway, go through my other attachment, and straight to these Route 53 resolvers I've just placed. So now all of a sudden I have this ability to, and by the way, I think the actual Route 53 resolvers are like all right here. I don't care that much. It's Route 53, right? Like whatever. So now I have this ability to now route into this VPC, go get the information I need, come back to this Cloud Hub private space, and then fire things off the way I want to. So if you remember when we did our NS lookup of my Salesforce.com, I got these public IPs right here. Well, if I come back to my NetTools and I now do my DNS lookup, and we're going to look up that my Salesforce.com space. So let me just copy it. We'll throw it up here. And I'm getting my private IPs. Those are the same IPs of my VPC endpoint. So what it's saying is, it's like, cool, if you want to go to this address now, you're actually going to follow these private IPs, which takes us back to our route table, which I'm going to put on top of that little that line. Which means that because they're a 172.16, and we'll just triple check. Yep. Or okay, no, they're 172.31. Okay, so let's keep that in mind. That means that it falls within this /12 space rather than the /24 space. And so that means it says, oh, go through the transit gateway and let the transit gateway figure out where you need to go from there. Okay, we can absolutely do that. So then it means that it's going to be looking for my VPC endpoints that are here instead of going straight to Salesforce. So basically, now we have the ability to kind of go, okay, let's grab this little line here, and just boom, it's gone, right? Because now I can basically say, nope, we're going to route all of our calls to anything that is, Michael McD, blah, 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 .mysalesforce.com, straight through my private link, because it's going to go through that VPC endpoint. And oh, by the way, if we go back to that curl that we saw before, and we say, hey, HTTPS, and we throw in that thing, this time, 200 OK. Everything's great, no redirections, no issues with anything, because it's like, yeah, you're golden, you're good. There's not going to be any problems here in how we actually tackle the flow of this data, right? And so, by the way, we have whipped through a whole bunch of stuff here in like 25, 30 minutes. So we're gonna like, kind of take it back and kind of review some of this stuff. And I really do want to answer some questions from people, because as we get into DNS stuff, as we get into this stuff, and we'll also make some comparisons between what we deploy in our private space that has the VPC endpoint and what we deploy in our disaster recovery space that doesn't. And we're going to make some comparisons just so we can kind of see how it all works. So anyway, so we've done this, we've deployed, we're all happy, everything's good. And now you have to ask yourself the question, how do I configure my application to make sure that I actually can connect directly to Salesforce through my VPC endpoint, which then goes through my transit gateway, which then goes through the private link, which then goes right, like, I can give you like a couple 100,000 different routes and things like that to talk through, but like, yeah, it's definitely a whole bunch of stuff that we're going to have to go through. So let's go ahead. I'm going to pull up my Anypoint Studio here, and I have a simple message flow project. Okay. And just so we can see how you don't have to have the private link for it to work, and you can actually let these things work kind of however you want them to work. We're just going to go ahead and edit this Salesforce config. I've already got set up. And so this is a little secret, by the way. You have to use OAuth authentication as far as I can tell. You might be able to use basic authentication through private link. I haven't gotten it to work yet. So I just want to make that abundantly clear. We might be able to make a second private space that could possibly do it. I don't know, right? There's some kajiggering and playing in games to be done that we're going to have to still figure out. But at least for now, what we have to do is we have to do it through OAuth. Now, the only thing that, and just to show you kind of a comparison versus a new one, Salesforce. You're going to notice when we flip back over to OAuth JWT, JWT is my favorite one to use. It's easy. You spin up a quick cert, you pop in your principal, you're basically done. That's Mike McDonald's way of doing it. However anybody else wants to kind of do it, and setting up the permissions to get all of the authorization, authentication stuff done. It's kind of a pain in the backside. And I don't actually go into that in the blog article, by the way, just because I wanted to focus on just the private connect portion of it. But, I'd love to hear from people. If you need to know how to set up authorization into Salesforce, when you're a super user, please let us know in the comments so that way I can, kind of think about how we do that in the future. But this token endpoint right here, you'll see is login.salesforce.com. You'll also see this audience URL, right? So this audience URL is actually not that important. Its only purpose is to say, am I going to prod? Let's move my hand so I'm on screen. Or am I going to sandbox, right? And so it's either going to be login.salesforce.com for the audience URL, or it's going to be test.salesforce.com. Nothing else really it doesn't need to be anything else. So what we have to do is we have to modify that token endpoint to make sure that, hey, everywhere we go to do all of our OAuth authorization, how we make sure everything works, has to be pointed at that CNAME that we just created in our private space. And I can already hear people, but Mike, you didn't set that up for your own machine. I'm like, yeah, of course I didn't. But my own machine doesn't necessarily need to use private link. I'm an individual user. I'm special, and there are ways to lock down Salesforce. There's also ways to configure routes, just like we've done for Cloud Hub. You can also do that from your own data center. You can do that from your own desktop. You can do that from pretty much anywhere, so long as you have the ability to build the paths you're trying to build, if that makes any sense to everybody. So while we wait for our application to boot up, I just created the simplest of simple apps. Honestly, all I'm doing is I go and I get user info about myself. There we go. So yeah, I'm just saying, hey, get user info. Who's the active user right now? What are they doing? My metadata is resolving. And so you'll see here, I'm just like, yeah, give me the username, email, first name, last name. Simple test just to make sure it works right out of the box right away. And I set my listener to something ridiculously silly, which was like, /PC-me, right? So if I come back to my Chrome and I'm just like, okay, cool, HTTP, localhost, 8081, PC, me, right? Oh, cool. There it is. We can see my username, and I'll zoom this in so that way it's actually visible for all of you on the, watching the actual stream. You'll see my first name, my last name, my email. And by the way, email me if you want. It's cool. I'll help you out. I'm happy to do that. And super easy, and it just works. Okay. So let's talk about, what we've done. Then we just go back into Studio as soon as my Alt tab decides to start working again. And all I have to do is just export my jar. Now, this is a little unknown sad fact about the Linux version of Anypoint Studio. It doesn't like to do the connection to and from, Anypoint. I don't know why. I know the PM, and he's like, I made him promise me that he would give me my own Linux release someday, just so that way I don't have to deal with all of the weirdness in the Linux space. But I do have that jar already downloaded. But you know what? Let's just make sure we've got the latest version of it. So we're just going to say, hey, export it. I'm sure many of you have seen this. It's just going to sit in my home directory and pop, 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 pop. Pop. Awesome. So cool. So we have that jar. So we can go back into Chrome now. We can get rid of this because we don't actually care about that anymore. And, we'll actually go into our applications and you'll see, hey, cool, I've already got my PC test deployed in my primary private space. Awesome. I'm not going to redeploy that because never break a working demo. And just to make sure it works just the way we expected it to, here it is working. Ooh, pulled up null. That was unexpected. I should have tested this before we came up. That's okay. This gives us a chance to kind of do a little bit of troubleshooting. So this is the good news about this thing is now we get to look at the logs. We get to see, hey, what the heck happened here? Maybe we need to reboot. Maybe something needs to happen. Yeah, we got no logs. So we're just going to start at first with just a simple application restart. That might be all we need to do. So we're just going to do a quick stop. And all right, cool. And we'll go ahead and let's just click back into anything else. That way we can refresh some of our JavaScript. And it should be start away. Yeah. All right. Let's do it. And then we'll go into logs and we'll kind of watch it. So while we're at it, questions, comments, thoughts. What do we got?
I don't see any questions yet.
All right. That's cool. Well, hello, Sophie. Hello, Ganesh. Hello. Is it Shana? And I know Mac J. Perry. He's good people. I've known that guy for at least 10 years. That's kind of fun. All right. So we are not logging here. This could be a fun day. Oh, of course. The minute I my ADD kicks in, the logs start flowing in. Did you notice that? That's kind of a well-known secret about every time you expect to move on something, it's just nope, we're done. We're not going to sit here. We're not going to do anything. So yeah. All right. Let's see where we are. Are we up? We are not up yet. All right. Not started. Standby mode. While we're doing this, of course, just as I said, while we're doing this, that must be the secret. I said, while we're doing this, as soon as I want to just double do things, we're going to do PC test and we're going to throw it over in our disaster recovery space, right? The one that we just tested, the one that we just deployed. We'll go back to our home directory. We'll find our CRM, Private Connect, Cloud Hub 2, US East 1. It doesn't matter that it's US East 1. It'll work just fine without it. I like to start at 0.2 cores, mostly because I don't like waiting for stuff to start up, as you can all tell. Oh, that was dumb. Darn it. All right. I clicked off it while we were still uploading the jar. My bad. Man, this is not my day. Kind of like Monday, right? Only this time I don't have to clean up and drill holes in the wall and rip up carpet and yeah. So I guess it is my day. I'll take this as being my day this time. What the heck just happened in the background? Did I get enough of it uploaded that it did start? That's amazing. I actually did not expect that. Okay, so we're running, everything's good. Let's see if we can't get that guy to work this time. All right. Not PC test. Oh yeah, PC test. Yep. PC me. There, right? It works this time. So what happened here? All right. Well, I don't actually know what broke. So let's not pretend we know what that is. But let's talk through what happened. All right. So the Salesforce API itself said, hey, I need to go to michaelmcd-blah.mysalesforce.com, right? So it went to Amazon's Route 53 based on the privately configured servers that we set up. Then it whipped back and said, cool, here's your IP address, rock and roll, let's go. So then it looks up in the route table. Where do I send this? Where do I send these packets? Where did this information go? The route table says, well, this is within that 172.16/12 space. So that means that you need to go through the transit gateway. Gotcha, bro. So then we fire out through the transit gateway attachment into the transit gateway. The transit gateway has its own route table that says, hey, I've got a 172.31.00/24. We're not going to look at it because it's really not that important right now. Send it down this transit gateway attachment. Got you, right? So then once it gets in here, right, just like our Cloud Hub VPC has a local space, so does the Amazon VPC. So does your private computer network at your own home, right? There's always a local subnet space that you need to know how to switch through, not route. Slightly different, right? So it says, cool, where you're looking for is that VPC endpoint. It's right over there. Specifically, your first target is this one in AZ1. Sure, right? Then it says, cool, I'm actually just a facade for Salesforce. So I'm going to go up through this private tunnel and into Salesforce. I'm going to do the thing, get the information. I'm going to come back exactly the path I came and into my Salesforce API. All right. And again, this is where I was saying about at the very beginning of our conversation today, it's so important to know how your traffic flows, because when you're the application developer, you're the one who's responsible for knowing where things are wrong. Your network teams are going to go, well, I don't know. Everything looks fine to me. How many times have we all heard that phrase? Everything looks fine to me. All green here. Yeah, everything's fine. Until the firewall guy is like, oh, wait, there's this weird log entry that I just scanned over before, right? So knowing where those things are and knowing how to troubleshoot through those. And speaking of troubleshooting through those, right? The very first thing you should always do, this is a cry out to every developer on the planet. Stop using ping. Ping is a terrible protocol. It doesn't give you any actual information. It doesn't actually follow the rules of TCP traffic, which is what 90% of what we do is, right? Unless you are Google doing YouTube videos or Twitch, ironically, doing unicast or multicast streams that are UDP based, always use Netcat, Socket. You could even use Telnet on Windows. I mean, you have to install it and it's pseudo built in, but you can actually open up a socket connection to any port on the planet just to see if it actually responds correctly. So super important to know for everybody. But as soon as I do this, I'm going to clear my console and run this. Awesome. I can connect on port 443. That means that TCP did its job. And oh, by the way, that little test right there that we saw, which was, 11 milliseconds and then 2223, right? The first 11 milliseconds, by the way, that's the whole negotiation. Is this a path? What's the path I need to take? What do I need to do? Every other one is just going to be that exact round trip amount of time it's going to take to do. So yeah, so the first one's like, hey, where do I go? Hey, where do I go? Hey, where do I go? Oh, okay, cool. And then it's boom, I know exactly where to go. This is what's called an ARP cache. Again, not super important. You don't necessarily need to know it, but it's a thing to kind of it exists somewhere. It's very similar to just like this routing table right here. An ARP cache just says, oh, you're looking for this? Go there. You're looking for this? Go there. We have tables like that at every layer of the networking stack. So super important to know those kinds of things. So we saw that it works, and we probably, by this point, fingers crossed, because we know how Mike's ADD's been so far today, we have a working one in our disaster recovery space. Awesome. But I didn't deploy was the net tools. So you're going to see the exact same thing happen in PC test, but you won't necessarily know that it worked correctly. So we're just going to do, net tools DR, and I'm just going to throw it in my private space, and we're going to upload my NetTools jar out of downloads. And of course, I forgot to give it 0.2 cores. It'll take 2 seconds longer to boot. That's fine. I don't think anyone here is going to be very upset. Least of all, Alex. She hasn't yelled at me yet this entire Twitch stream, which I think is just a miracle. She's never yelled at me ever, people. I just want to say that for the public audience. That's just not how she operates. So I guess while we wait for this guy to load up and do its thing, some of the things I want to call out here are, in terms of when you set up your private connect and everything, you're going to see these start and end IP addresses. You don't really have to worry about these. These guys are just IP addresses on the opposite end of your tunnel. And what it basically means is that when we saw all those 172.3.1 addresses that I set up on MySpace, which I think we can see right here. Nope. Right here. They actually just map to these. It's just a one-to-one mapping. So likely, that 172.31.136 maps directly to this 100.113.639. You don't really have to worry about it. This is actually just more of when you have problems and you have to open up a support ticket. This way you can say, hey, listen, here's my range for my private connect, so you know where to look, Mr. Support Agent, for my stuff. That's really all it is, right? And especially if we're trying to look at logs and we're trying to see all these things, it's just nice to have more information than less, right? So We've got everything all set up. I have a almost soon working working application. We'll go green here any second now. That's fine. We can see our little green exclamation point with an empty message, which means success, but we're not really sure how. Yeah, and no way, you can't exit it out because you need to know that success was there forever. So, as we're kind of going through all these things too, I just want to kind of encourage everybody, use NSLookup all the time. Know where everything that you're calling is. It's not because those IPs addresses are going to stay the same, but knowing that it's a public IP and that's probably going to go out through some sort of internet gateway or through that firewall that your company needs to have in place is super important, because then you know, oh, hey, I'm probably getting blocked somewhere, right? Versus, oh, it's just going to my desktop. Well, that's probably not ideal. Never host your application on your desktop for an enterprise. I actually did that once as an intern, and it worked out because it was like early 2000s. Don't say anything about my age, please. It was early 2000s, and they were like, hey, we need to get people to sign up for this event. And I was like, cool, I'm just going to host IIS and build an ASP.NET application on my desktop and have people sign up through there. And it'll fill up an Access database. And then every time I'd open up the Access database, it would break the application because you weren't allowed to access it, ironically, from two users at the same time. Just, fun, silly stories from, listening to me rant and ramble. So every time you use NetTools, by the way, same username and password out of the box. You can actually overwrite that username and password either directly in the application, or you can do it through the properties file. So we're just gonna say, cool, yeah, VPC tools, and it is literally some password almost, right? It's all in that document in there. So we're all good. And this is fun. I know what's going on here. We need to do a hard refresh, I hope. Oh, you're not going to work for me today, are you? You are not. We're not going to try and troubleshoot this. This one, I had problems with this before, and sometimes the ingress does not like NetTools on Cloud Hub 2. So we are just going to say that's not going to work today. At least not for the sake of me wanting to get. Oh, yep. It is because I actually screwed up the ingress. Okay, that's actually an easy solve. Yeah, we can just go like this, add an endpoint, and we'll switch it back to the public endpoint. Once we hit apply changes, the application will reboot. Hopefully it will reboot correctly. Yes, it will. Thank God. That was much easier to solve than I thought it was. When you're in the middle of trying to demo stuff and you're like, please don't break, please don't break, please don't break. So I guess what I want to ask everybody, hey, has this been useful, right? Like, no comments, no interest, like, let's hit it. We got 10 minutes left, and I don't want you to feel like I've just been talking at you this entire time. I want to talk with you.
I feel like it's just so clear that people don't really have questions.
I really hope that's the case. I really, really do. So, I can tell you right now for sure, though, that blog post is not going to be active by the end of this stream.
It is.
So, no, but the blog post.
Yeah, Medium.
It's already live?
Yeah.
What? Oh my God, it's published?
Yep.
Hey, that's super cool. Holy crap, it was published 9 minutes ago. Wait, how did you know that?
Because I can also see the blog stuff.
Holy crap, that's awesome. Thanks, Alex.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So anytime any of you want to do any of these things, they're absolutely doable. They're absolutely traceable. This is a very easy project. It's a fun project to do, especially if you're, trying to really learn. Oh, nope. VPC tools, some paths. See, and now it came up correctly because now we don't have too many boxes. So if I come in here and I go into DNS and we throw in that demo thing, you're going to notice, oh, hey, yeah, didn't work out anywhere near the way we planned it to. And similarly, I could go back actually into my normal one and do the same exact DNS thing, but we'll use Cloudflare instead. And you'll see that it comes out with its public IPs. I might have my firewall up, so I can't go to Cloudflare. So we'll have to see how that goes. But yeah. So, all right. Well, that's kind of all I really got that's at any way, shape, or form remotely useful. I guess the question I have, Alex, is was this at least fun for you?
Yeah, definitely. It's funny because normally, like in university, my worst subjects of IT were always security and networking. I just hated that. But now I look at it from a different perspective, and it's more fun than it should be.
Than it should be. Well, you know what I'll tell you is that for me has always been so interesting is it's like knowing the flow of the packets, right? Knowing how things move and how things go, just like the plumbing in your house, is so important because you want to make sure that like at any point someone's going to tell you, no, we cannot, no, we will not, no, right? Like it's going to end up being one of those things where it's like totally not going to be a thing, you know? And but the reality of it is that like, no, you need to know, you want to know all this stuff to be the best possible developer you can be, right? And I would like to believe that anyone who's sitting here watching this stream and working with you is really just trying to do it to better themselves, right? And so, you know, I would constantly encourage you, learn some basic networking, just at least in terms of like, how many hops does it take to get from point A to point B? What are those hops? Are they routers? Are they firewalls? If they're firewalls, what sort of restrictions are in place? Because the more you understand that, the better you're ultimately going to be able to write, you know, like remote accessing code all the time, you know, and especially as you start to learn like different mechanisms, different tools, different methods. Like, for example, did you know the Mule runtime doesn't have a two-way connection to the management plane? It only reaches out to the management plane, gets its instructions, and comes back, but it doesn't actually, the management plane cannot go to the Mule runtime and say, do this thing. So about once a second, it's going out, hey, do I have anything to do? No, cool. Hey, do I have anything to do? No, cool. Hey, right, etc. So yeah. Well, with that, I'm going to stop boring everyone to death with talks about networking and, you know, and talks about plumbing. And, you know, we can kind of move into, you know, having a great day.
Yeah, sounds good. I don't see any questions. So
it was either the most boring possible presentation anyone's ever had, or it was the most informative. Maybe both.
Well, there were people watching, so.
Not the worst stream you've ever had. Again, I'm 2 for 2.
Well, I've done streams where I don't do like anything at all in the whole stream because I'm just troubleshooting everything and I don't get to do anything at all. So maybe that's worse.
So awesome. Well, then if that's the case, then we're all good. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks anyone who's still out there for listening. A lot of fun for me to just kind of go through. I got to vamp a little bit. We got to see that I have ADD. It was fun for everyone and informative.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So everyone watching, remember to go to twitch.tv/MuleSoft_community. So you can see our previous recordings, you can see our schedule, and you can get notifications as soon as we are live. And Shauna says, thank you both for your time. Not boring at all. There you go. Awesome. Alrighty. Well, yeah, this was fun. I hope I get to see you again soon. I love your energy.
I suspect you're going to see more and more of me because management seems to like that I like to talk on Twitch. So, you know, you're going to be next time we're probably going to talk about web application firewalls and security and stuff, and that's when your eyes are really going to glass over.
Alrighty. Well, looking forward to it.
Awesome. Have an awesome day. Thanks again.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.